My name is Sarah Steffen. I'm the assistant chair of the Box Turtle Connection, which is why I believe everybody's here today. We do have a small group, so if you guys have questions, like Julia said, throw them in the chat, and I'm happy to interact with you guys since we don't have quite as many folks right now. But I'm going to throw up my presentation on the screen. All right, Julia, we're good, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so as I mentioned, my name is Sarah Steffen. I'm the assistant chair of the Box Turtle Connection. I'm also the assistant manager of Durant and Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserves, which are in North Raleigh. If you've not been up there before, I definitely recommend checking them out. But today we're talking about the Box Turtle Connection, building a legacy. There we go. So if you haven't heard of the Box Turtle Connection before, it actually is a statewide project studying eastern box turtles. And so it's basically a mark and recapture program, and I'm going to go into that a lot more in detail. And I will still keep this short so we have plenty of time for questions at the end. But basically, we're asking a few questions about box turtles because we don't know a lot about them. So how many turtles live in North Carolina? Are populations declining? And should we or do we need to protect them? So we'll go through these a little bit and maybe get some answers to some of these questions. So first off, why do we care about box turtles? Well, one, they're cute. I mean, you've got this little hatchling turtle. He's about the size of a quarter in front of you. Actually, don't know the sex. Could be male or female or unknown. But they're really cute. People love turtles because they're easy to handle. It's one of the few wildlife species that you can actually pick up and look at or take home and make a pet or take photographs of, things like that. So they have been considered charismatic species. People, I don't think I've ever, that's probably not true. I've probably met a couple people who don't like box turtles, but overall, most people that I talk to really love box turtles, especially if they've seen one in the wild. And it's also, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but it is also North Carolina state reptile. So just very briefly, I wanted to go over, I'm sure all of you know what a reptile is, but I wanted to go through some of the characteristics. So they do have scales or scutes on turtles. The scales have a specific name called a scute. And so this whole plate right here on the turtle shell would be one scute, and then this little plate, and I think you guys can see my cursor. So those are individual scales. They're also called scutes. They're cold-blooded, so they do have to either find warm places to hide when it's cold out or find cool places to hide when it's warm out, or sunbathe if it's really warm day and not temperatures aren't too hot. They do lay eggs, which is one of the reasons they may be in decline. They only lay about 8 to 10 eggs at a time. They might lay up to 3 times a year, but not every year do they lay eggs. And then it takes them a very long time to become adults. And then our last one is that they're completely on their own after birth. And this isn't true for all reptiles, but most reptiles it is true. So once that box turtle lays eggs actually in the dirt, completely covered, the babies will hatch out about 2 months later, 2 to 3 months later, and then they're completely on their own. So why are they called box turtles? Well, here's a great picture of why. This is actually a live box turtle. And as you can see, it's completely closed up in its shell. It's the only turtle that can do this. They actually have a hinge at the bottom of their shell, right where this turtle's resting on the ground, which makes them able to open and close this top piece just like a door. So they can completely close up in their shell, hence the name box turtle. Genus, species, and subspecies actually down here, Terrapene carolina is the eastern box turtle. So that's the one we are studying with the Box Turtle Connection, and the only one, unless one's been released as a pet, it's the only wild one you'll find in North Carolina is the eastern box turtle. So, and here's a great range map on the right side of your screen. So you can see that we have different species of box turtles, but the eastern is the one we have mostly along the East Coast. We have Florida box turtle, Gulf Coast box turtle, and also 3-toed box turtles. And they actually are only terrestrial turtles. So a lot of people think of tortoises as terrestrial turtles, but they are different. Tortoises, turtles, terrapins are all a little bit different. I'm not going to get into that today, but I am happy to talk to you about it if you would like to know. But they are technically our only land turtle. So if you see a turtle high and dry in the forest, It could be an aquatic turtle laying eggs, but most likely it's going to be an eastern box turtle if it looks like the pictures that I'm showing you today. So they do prefer forested areas like the photo you see here, but also prairies, so overgrown fields. We have a few in Raleigh, if you're not familiar with kind of the prairie land that used to be here. And they come in all different varieties. So as you can see, I think, hold on. I want to make sure I don't mess up my presentation. I just did something. Okay, can you still see it, Julia?
Yeah, you're still good.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I tried to move Julia's screen. Okay, so we have lots of different varieties. You can see they all have different patterns, and we, just like our fingerprints actually, they have unique patterns on their shells, so that if you do have a box turtle that happens to come in your yard, you can likely take photographs of it, and if you find one, let's say 5-10 years down the road, you can take photographs again and compare those and see if their markings actually match and if it's the same turtle or not. So that's a really unique characteristic about box turtles, that each pattern on a box turtle is going to be different. So not only their shell patterns are different, but also their coloration. So you can see this guy on the left is very bright yellow with bright red eyes. We've got this one in the middle, kind of more orangey tan colored, and then one on
Sarah,
the right.
you haven't advanced the slide.
What's that?
It's still the shell.
Oh, see, I think something happened. Okay, let me see if I can go all the way out. Sorry, guys. It's not my first time. I've only been in COVID land how long? All right. Sorry, something must have happened when I tried to move your picture around. Okay, are we good? Did you see this slide?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so this guy with our fun turtles. So the guy on the left has bright yellow, bright red eyes, the tan color in the middle. So all colors, pretty much the same shape and size. There's a little variation in size, but as you can see, most of them, I like to call them cheeseburger size. And that's also how we tell kids to hold them. You can hold them like a cheeseburger. Safest way to pick them up. So just a few turtle facts to get you knowing our eastern box turtle a little bit more. They are very camouflaged, so blend in very nicely with leaf litter, and we've got a little game that we'll play in a little bit with you guys. They are omnivores, and they will pretty much eat anything. So they'll eat slugs, mushrooms, grapes, worms. If they could get a fish, they'd get a fish. Opportunistic feeders, anything that's wiggling in front of them, they really enjoy, and lots of fruits and mushrooms, things like that. So as I mentioned, it takes them a very long time to mature, but they do live a very long time. So we generally say 30 to 50 years in the wild. I'm not sure that we've ever been able to track a turtle longer than that. So I'm not sure if there are any wild turtles that are over 100 that we know of. I'm sure there are out there though. But as far as captive turtles, we know that they can live up to 100 years. And then they don't start reproducing until about 7 to 10 years of age, and they only lay about 8 to 10 eggs. So this is one of the reasons they're slow producing. They take a long time to mature. So that is one reason that their populations may be declining slightly, or more than slightly. We do believe that they can serve as an indicator species, which if you know a little bit about wildlife management, it can tell us basically an indicator species or a keystone species can tell us the health of that ecosystem. So box turtles, they don't have a lot of predators because they can close up completely in their shell, like we mentioned, but they eat so many things that they're an important part of that food chain. So I've got mayapple on your right here, which is a native plant that you may find in some of our Raleigh parks. And box turtles are actually really important for dispersing the seeds of the mayapple fruit, which a lot of other animals can't do. So that is just one example of how they may play an important role in the ecosystem, and may actually be able to tell, if we're studying box turtles, we may learn a lot more about other species, whether it's plants, fungus, or other animals. And then in North Carolina, they are considered a priority species, so we don't have any protection for box turtles in North Carolina, but Wildlife Resources Commission, which is the state organization, wants to basically learn as much as we can, get more research about them, because we don't have a lot of data on box turtle populations. We believe they're in decline, but we don't have the data to support that. So that's what the Box Turtle Connection is working on. And as I mentioned, they're our state reptile, which I think is a very good choice. So why do we care about box turtles? I've talked about they're a charismatic species. I've talked about. It's a state reptile. They might be an indicator species for the ecosystem. Another big reason we care about them is because we are impacting them greatly. So obviously you see the car on the right-hand side, that, and the box turtle's right in front of it, if you can see that. And so getting hit by cars is a huge issue for box turtles. We just keep developing land, building roads, right where they used to live, right in the forested areas that they used to take over. So what's going to happen? They're going to start crossing the road more frequently to get from one side of their forest to the other side of the forest. And so they're going to encounter cars. And if they don't, either people don't see them, they look really small on the road. If you've ever helped a turtle, you'll probably notice like, wow, I thought that was a rock. And then you're flying by them. And so you're like, oh, should I stop? Yes, you should always stop if you can. And you always just want to place them on the side that they're headed towards. But getting hit by cars is a big one. As I mentioned, development, so away their land and they don't have anywhere else to go, and then there's less food available for them. And then on the left side here, this was actually just a shell of a turtle, but you can see these little bite marks. So that could have been a predator, but it's probably not what killed that turtle. But obviously other things we have, just like we have diseases in humans that are becoming worldwide epidemics, pandemics. There are also diseases in turtles. There's one called ranavirus that we've been watching out for because it has affected turtles really terribly in other states and other areas. Fortunately, fingers crossed, we have not seen it in North Carolina yet, but could like wipe out populations. So lots of reasons to care about box turtles. And just really quickly, like I mentioned, in North Carolina, there's no protection for them, but internationally they are recognized as a vulnerable species. So most likely if we don't do anything now to start protecting them, then their populations are going to decline. In the US, there's no federal protections, but other states, not North Carolina, but other states do have them listed as threatened or even a species of concern, which is kind of right above threatened. I'm most excited about, I don't know if you guys have heard, but as of July 1st, Virginia just instituted a new ban on reptiles. They used to be very similar to North Carolina, where you could take a certain amount of reptiles or amphibians out of the wild and make them pets, even if they were native. Under this ban, you can't take any turtles out of the wild and make them your pet, or you can face a fine. And then, yeah, I think that's mainly it. But one of their wildlife biologists said people can still go out, look at these turtles, pick them up and take photos, which is what I always encourage. And we'll talk about how you can get involved and take photos of them later on, because enjoying them in their wild habitat is the best thing that we can do for them, especially knowing that we're already decimating populations by through development and through vehicle collisions. So taking them out of the wild, we know we can stop doing that. And that'll be one way that hopefully we can help their populations. So I mentioned this is a mark and recapture study. What that means is that whenever we find a box turtle in one of our study sites, so Durant and Horseshoe Farm are both study sites for the box turtle connection, we can find the turtle, we collect some data on it, and then we give it a 3-letter code, and I'll show you how we do that in a second. And then we release it exactly where we find it and hope maybe we can find it again. But the first thing we have to do is find the turtles, which is a lot harder than you might think. I don't know if you guys have seen box turtles in the wild, if you're one of the few people that can find them frequently, or if you've maybe only seen them once or twice in your life. If I wasn't part of this project, I'd probably only have seen 5 box turtles my entire life, but because I'm in this project and have been working with it for about 10 years, I've probably marked over 200 turtles. So it is very hard to find them. So how do we do it? Well, these fine individuals here were all previous interns of mine, and they have they would go out and search for box turtles and help work them up. But you also get to train your eye to look for box turtles. So this is Scout. He is our resident ambassador turtle at Durant. He is non-releasable because he was chewed on by a dog. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but the very front of his shell is all chewed up, and he actually cannot close up completely in his shell. So he would be vulnerable to predators. So he actually could not be released. So we're going to try and play a little game. And if you guys in the chat want to say, yes, you see it, or no, you don't, Julia's going to let me know, so then we can move on to the next slide, because I've got a few of them. And I just want to test your camouflage skills. So if you guys are ready, if you have your eyes ready, Scouts ready. Oh, that was an easy one. I forgot I even circled him there. Okay, next one. All right. Can you find the turtle? And you remember, you can put in the chat if you see it. Otherwise, if it's been 30
Looks like
seconds.
we're getting a few yeses here.
Okay. They do get increasingly difficult. He's right there by that log, which is one thing we usually look for when we're out in the woods. Look near logs. And I took these photos a while ago, so now I don't know if I'm able to find the turtle myself.
Got our first yes for this one.
All right. It is trickier. All right.
Got another yes.
Yeah, right there. Okay, next. Increasingly more difficult. That one's really hard.
One person's found it.
Oh my gosh. I gave a hint in the first guess we did. I said we always look at these when we're in the woods. 3, 2, 1. Ta-da! You can see just like the back part of his shell right here. I think there might be one more after this, if this is not the last.
We got a couple of yeses. I think you've got some people that you may need to hire to do some turtle scouting.
Yeah, I'm up for that. I have to tell you guys a story. So I was out with one of our staff members last week, and she points probably like, let's say we're standing here, and she's pointing like way over there. She's like, do you guys see that turtle? I'm like, I don't know. What are you talking about? And we start walking closer. We're probably like within 5 feet of this turtle. And I told you guys, I've like been doing this for 10 years. Could not find the turtle and had to get within a foot of it before I could even see it. The only reason she saw it is because it had been walking. So the movement caught her eye. But oh my gosh, young eyes are also beneficial. There he is. So this was, I actually used Scout for all these photos. So he was our little star there. So you guys can grade yourself, or everybody's a winner in this game. All right, so I'll try to run through this stuff kind of quickly, but this is, I'm basically cut up our data sheet into parts. I'm going to talk about what data we collect with each thing. So the very first piece we actually usually look at is site name is almost always the same because we know where we are. So I would probably write Durant up here. But we want to know if it's a recapture or not. Have we ever seen this turtle before? Does it already have markings on it? And once you see how we mark them, you'll know how we can tell if they're marked or not. And then if they are marked, they have a turtle ID associated with that. If not, then we get to assign one. Date and time is pretty obvious. And then we want to know who did the data collection. But the most important piece of this part of the data sheet is our GPS coordinates, because we want to know exactly, one, where to put the turtle back if we had to bring it in the office. Or just for the future, if we are able to find this turtle again, we at least have 2 data points that say, we know that this turtle's traveled this distance. If you guys have ever heard people talk about box turtles and how much land they need to be able to live, I often hear 1 acre home ranges for some reason, like they only need an acre to survive. I used to track turtles, and we had turtles that would use almost 80 acres, like our whole entire park. And then we had turtles that only needed like a 1/4 acre. So I think that's just kind of gotten passed down as, urban legend as far as how much data or how much land box turtles need, because we really don't know. We're still studying that. But yeah, that's why one of the reasons, even if we're not tracking them, we can get some information from their GPS coordinates. We do like to know what temperature it is outside and the last time it rained, because if you guys do find box turtles, you'll know that right after a rain, maybe more than what we got this afternoon if you're in Raleigh, but they do like to come out right after the rain, especially if it's evening or morning time in the summer when it's really hot. All right. So this is how we mark. We've got this fancy file. It's a triangular file, very much like a finger file. But the difference is that this can go through a turtle's shell and not just your finger. But it is very similar as far as marking it, because a lot of people want to know if this hurts the turtle. And as far as we can tell, the turtles have never told us, but the way they react, it's not hurting them. Box turtles almost never bite. I think I've had one box turtle try to bite me, and they rarely will defecate or urinate on us when they do this. And that is their biggest defense, is urinating or defecating, because you wouldn't want to eat something that just pooped everywhere. So if they don't urinate, defecate, or are constantly trying to get away from us, we're considering that not very stressed out. And this is actually a very non-invasive way to monitor wildlife. A lot of people have to put either tags in their skin, or bigger mammals, they'll put big collars on them and they have to sedate them to be able to do that. The turtles are staying awake the whole time. We mark them once, hopefully their entire life. Sometimes we do have to either make their marks a little deep the second time we find them or fix them. But generally, we're only marking them once, and then we're just collecting the rest of the data if we find them again. And because of all that, we do have a special permit from the commission. So not anybody can go out and go mark turtles. You guys can't start doing this unless you're part of the Box Turtle Connection. But this is the best way we found to be able to look at turtles. A lot of people ask, why don't you paint them? Well, they actually absorb vitamins and UV rays through their shell. And so if you start painting them, you're actually affecting that. And these scales, or these scutes, grow continuously as they age, and they also shed just like a snake skin, but they do it in a piece. So these, one, they may not stay on, two, it's not healthy for the turtles. So this seems to be the best way to go about doing that. So far, that's what our science is showing. We'll see if things change in the future. But we mark JLo here. So I've got our little turtle marking scheme on the right, and these are marginal scutes on the outside. And I showed you guys very early on each little scute here, but you can it's hard to tell in this photo, but each one of these scutes relates to one of these letters. So we marked the scute JLO, and now she's got her fancy new name. And you can tell they're not very deep, but we want to make these markings deep enough that, let's say 10 years, 20 years down the road, if we haven't found this turtle and all of a sudden this turtle turns up, that we can still identify it. So a lot of people try to go a little bit more shallow, but that is like the perfect depth for marking turtles. And then we take photos with the date. And then we have fancy calipers to measure. We take all sorts of measurements of their shell, top, bottom, at their hinge, so we get the height of their shell, lots of different measurements. And then turtle description. So we want to know what the turtle looked like. Eye color can play a role in identifying sex, but not always. People like to think if they have bright red eyes, they're automatically a male, but that's not necessarily true. Sex in box turtles and most reptiles is determined by temperature, not by genetics. So that means wherever the eggs are in the nest that the turtle laid, the hotter temperatures make females, and the cooler temperatures make males. And you can remember that by hot chicks and cool dudes. So if there are eggs right in the middle that are either hot or cold, you will have turtles with unknown sexual characteristics, which is why you see a big unknown here. And there is no problem with marking a turtle as unknown. Basically, you just say there are 7 sexual characteristics that you can look at, eye color being 1. They have to have at least 3 that either show male or female, or 3 that don't agree with each other, and then we say it's unknown. And so unknown happens quite frequently, actually. And then all these fancy acronyms on the right, are for measuring the turtles. So those are just different measurements: straight carapace length, plastron length. Those are parts of the turtle shell. Annuli count is kind of like counting rings on a tree, except that we used to think it meant that it was going to tell us how old the turtle is, and that is no longer the case either, because science changes a lot and we learn lots of new things. But we're still counting them because maybe one day in the future they'll tell us something, maybe how healthy the turtle was. We're not sure. And then we look at the habitat type. We always take photos, is the most important part. Turtles get mismarked occasionally. People might read the wrong scoot number and call JLO maybe JKO instead of JLO. If we have photographs, we can identify that so that if we find JKO in the future, we say, oh, it was supposed to be JLO. So photos are always super helpful. And that, I mean, I love photography, but I also just think for wildlife science, photos can tell you so much about things. So. All right, so photographing, we just take a picture of the top of the shell, the bottom of the shell with their little ID cards here. And this mat in the background actually does have a metric scale on it. It's one of the few things I could find that had metric units and not just inches. So this is how we take photos. So if you guys take photos of turtles in your yard, then that is something you could do. You can take them just like that, I mean. And then we also collect information on injuries, damaged shell. You can see I actually just marked this turtle on July 5th. But some wearing of those scoop markings, another reason not to paint them is because if they start getting this to happen, then the paint's going to go away. But we denote that on our data sheet as well. And they can also have parasites or be ill. There are rehabbers in the area, and you can decide. Well, as project leaders, we decide if we want to bring them into a turtle rescue or not. There are pros and cons to both, so we kind of weigh it depending on how serious the injury or illness might be. All right, so I used to work at Piedmont Wildlife Center, and we actually, I think they're still doing it. They're tracking box turtles using radio telemetry, so that's what these big antennas are. I had just replaced these two turtles' antennas, so that's why there's this big white spot on, this is AOW back here. AOW and Cho, they liked each other a lot. We found them mating quite frequently. I actually wondered if maybe they were attracted to each other's transmitters. But I don't know that if they mated before we put transmitters on them or not. So it's just kind of interesting. You can find out a lot more about them by tracking their movements. And these aren't GPS, so we actually had to go out and track them, find them like this. And then once we found them, so we've got a big antenna over here. It connects to the radio transmitter, just like a radio in your car with the antennas or with the satellites. And then it goes back to the antenna and then it sends out a beep. And the louder the beep is, the closer you are to the turtle. And so once we found the turtle, we were able to mark those GPS points, and that's how we could track their movements. And that's how we would find out if they were mating with other turtles, or maybe eating something we'd not seen them eating before, or maybe running away from us because they hear the transmitter and now they know what it means, or the antenna and hear the beeping. All right. So there's lots of things that all of this information can tell us. And basically, we're collecting a lot of data right now. We've been doing this for about 10 years, but as I mentioned, because box turtles are such long-lived species, we don't have a lot of results yet, which is totally okay. We do have some, but the results basically say our populations are staying the same, which is what we're expecting. In 10 years, you're not going to see if, unless something catastrophic came through like ranavirus, like a pandemic for turtles. You wouldn't see drastic decline in numbers that quickly. One thing we really want to start seeing is more baby box turtles. We at Durant, we find a lot of very old box turtles, and that's actually something that's very exciting, but also I keep thinking in the back of my mind, well, where are the babies and the juvenile turtles? Because we need to make sure they're reproducing and that those guys are growing up too. So we'll just have to see what happens. But if you're in any of the parks, or if you are at your house or just around anywhere, really, we need more data in urban areas. And this is where you guys can come in and help. So if you find a box turtle, you can take photos just like this one to your right. If you don't have a mat, I don't expect people to carry this mat around. I don't carry it around with me. But if you have some sort of scale, whether it's a key, like don't use a credit card unless you can block out the numbers and stuff, but something that's a standard size that we can compare to the turtle is really useful. And GPS information, which I know sometimes is embedded in photos now, so that you might not even have to worry about taking a GPS coordinate, but it's really easy to do in Google Maps now. And you can upload this information to Herp Mapper, is one specifically for reptiles. It's a community science initiative trying to document reptiles and amphibians all over the world. And then iNaturalist is very similar, except it's with all wildlife. And you can actually, one thing that we are concerned about with box turtles is poachers, and that was something I didn't mention in the beginning about predators. But poaching, especially in the reptile herp community, is still a big thing. So there are ways. Herp Mapper actually doesn't share coordinates of your findings. In iNaturalist, you can obscure your GPS coordinates so that people can't see them. They'll just know, oh, there was a box turtle at Lake Johnson, which, okay, good luck finding it now. But if you have a GPS coordinate, again, probably good luck finding it again. But maybe it's a place that hangs out all the time, and so somebody wouldn't have to look very far for it. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. If you do want to contribute data, is just thinking about maybe hiding or obscuring GPS coordinates if you can. Piedmont Wildlife Center, as I mentioned, where I used to work, also started a project called Turtle Trekkers. And you can go directly on their website and submit this information with photos. And what's really cool about that, we started working with a nonprofit called Wild Track. And they are working on, it's slow because it's a nonprofit and they don't have a lot of money, both Wild Track and Piedmont. But they're working on an app to be able to extrapolate data points from the turtle shell. So basically looking at the ratio of these scutes. It's not the pattern of the shell, which is what everybody thinks and what I thought it was going to do originally. And it can say, yep, that's turtle JLo that we saw 2 years ago. Or it can say, nope, that looks nothing like JLo. This is a brand new turtle. So this may be the way of the future if we can get some money and get it working, that we can, quote unquote, mark them without having to do anything to their shell. So that would be a completely non-invasive technique, but coming soon. But Piedmont Wildlife Center now, since they're still in the beta phase, really needs some of these photos to help test out that software. And happy to talk more about that. So if you find a turtle, again, take photos. You can help out with community science. If it's found on the road or in your yard, not injured, you can leave it alone or place it on the side it was headed towards. Hopefully everybody here likes turtles, and that's why you came tonight, so you already know that. But always helps to share that information. I feel like just in the past 10 years, really, that more and more people know that rule. Just like, don't try to take it home with you. Don't put it way out into the woods somewhere. Just put it on the side it was headed towards. Otherwise, they spend the rest of their lives trying to get back to the place that you took them from. They have a very good mental map of where everything is in their home range. If it's injured and you're in this area, Turtle Rescue Team at NC State is great. I've worked with them a lot. They're also local rehabbers in many places that will help box turtles, especially if they're hit by cars. A lot of times they might need some more surgery. But if it's something minor, like cuts, ear infections, things like that, local rehabbers might be able to help. And then don't relocate. So I mentioned they have a mental map, but also I think you guys are probably traumatized by this little COVID symbol by now. But I like to put it on there. I think COVID actually was a great teacher as far as wildlife diseases are concerned, because I don't think a lot of people understood that if you relocate somebody from another place and put them in North Carolina, and let's say they had COVID, and then everybody in North Carolina gets COVID, same thing with a turtle. If you take a turtle from another place, maybe it has some disease it's okay with, it was asymptomatic, no problem. Now you put it in North Carolina, none of these turtles have ever seen this before, and they all end up with coronavirus or some other interesting disease that's coming out. So a couple reasons not to relocate, and it's actually illegal in North Carolina to relocate for that reason, because you can spread diseases to new populations. It's a little fun fact for you guys there. So that's all. This is me marking one of the first turtles at Durant. I was very happy about it. We tried to start last year marking turtles, but because of COVID, we didn't get to. So I was very excited to finally find one. So thank you, everybody. I think we got time for some questions if we have any.
So if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to either throw it in the chat and I'll read it out, or you can unmute yourself and ask Sarah directly.
And if y'all have questions in the future, please feel free. I can put my email up there again if you need it, but I'm always happy to talk box turtles or herps in general to folks.
So Sarah, you mentioned there's 7 characteristics to gender ID a box turtle. What are those? I know it's I've always heard the eye and then the plaster in the belly where it's scooped or flat.
Yes. So there's those two. So they're actually eyes are one, and then head and legs, because they tend to be like brightly colored if they're males, both eyeballs and their head and legs. On the bottom of their shell are the plastron. If there's a little thumbprint, I like to call it, then it's a male. They also, let me see if I can share his photos again. I've got two. Let's see which one works. Yeah, little indention here, which you can kind of tell this guy's got an indention. Then it's a male. If they're marginal scutes, you see how they're almost flat back here now because they kind of flare out. That's a male. It's much harder to see markings on a female because they go straight down. And then hind claws, which as you see this upside down turtle, it's very hard to see hind claws most of the time because they almost always tuck their butt and their hind legs in, but not their head. Some turtles will completely stay closed the whole time. And then tail is another one. If they have a longer tail, it's a male. Shorter tail is generally a female. So again, you can see I've had many turtles who are kind of tannish brown, eyes and legs, maybe a tiny indentation on the plastron, like a thumbprint, but you can't really tell. Can't see the tail, can't see the feet. Like, I don't know. Oh, and the height of the shell is another one because females have to store eggs, so they tend to be taller. But unless you have another turtle to compare it to, or you've seen lots of turtles, that is a really, really hard one to show. I was going to see if I got another one, but Scout here. Scout. But yeah, the height of the shell. And Scout's a male, and that, I mean, he kind of looks tall in that picture. But Andrew said he submitted photos on iNaturalist. Yay! Did you obscure your GPS points? And I don't know if iNaturalist, I feel like iNaturalist for certain species might keep them obscure, but I'm not sure. But we do, for all the city parks, we actually have projects on iNaturalist. You don't have to join the project to get your findings in those projects, but it's really cool because it allows us as park managers to go in and see all of the observations that have been recorded for the park. So there's one for Lake Johnson, Durant, Horseshoe, and any turtle photos you put in there, if they're from within the park limits, they'll show up in our park project.
So Sarah, in case we have anybody else on here that's with an organization, how would an organization join the Box Turtle Connection to help with this project?
Yeah, so we have trainings every 2 years right now. We may change that and have them more frequently. But really, it's just getting in touch with me or the chair of the Box Turtle Connection, who is Ashley Levere. I completely forgot to give a shout out to the folks who started the Box Turtle Connection, which are from UNC Greensboro. Catherine Matthews and Ann Summers are both two professors from UNCG, and Anne is still very much involved, even though she is retired. I don't think she's ever going to be able to step away, which is a good thing. We don't want her to. And so it's Ashley, the chair, me and Anne, who kind of decide when and how to get folks started. So yeah, and we are really looking for folks. We need more sites at the coast and in the mountains. We have a lot in the Piedmont, and I think that's because it's where a lot of us live to begin with. So we've reached out to friends, but if you know of other sites that are interested, we still could use some in the Piedmont, but around the Raleigh area, we have a lot, which is why I was mentioning earlier, those urban areas are really great to figure out what's happening with turtles in those settings. But yeah, you can just email me.
When are box turtles most active? Like, do they have a set breeding time, or is it kind of like when it's warm out, they're active?
So they breed pretty much any time from spring to fall, and they hibernate all winter long. So they usually go down under, and they actually just bury themselves underground. So between mid-November and mid-March, I would say. Sometimes they come up later. I think this year we didn't start seeing turtles until mid-May. One year I started seeing them mid-February. But really, spring and fall are their most active times when it's not super hot, but they are more active at night when it's this hot out in the summer. And yeah, right after rain showers, things like that. So, but yeah, they will breed anytime. And I don't know if you guys caught this, but I mentioned early on that females, they may not lay every year, but they can lay up to 3 nests per year. So you get one in the spring, one in the summer, one in the fall, and the one in the fall, sometimes the babies will actually overwinter in the nest before hatching out in the spring. So it's very fun.
For those of you that are interested, I put Sarah's email in the chat so you can reach out to her with that.
Thank you.
And Sarah, are you doing anything with volunteers helping out at either Durant or Horseshoe for helping?
Not yet. We don't. I think there are some sites that utilize volunteers, but because it is such a skilled data collection process and requires some training that goes into it, and we're under the permit, we generally just stick with staff. But that's why I like to get folks involved with the turtle trekkers or iNaturalist or Herp Mapper, because I do want people to be able to feel like they can give back to this project, and it really is helping. And in different areas than where our study sites are. So at this time, no, but we'll see what happens in the future.
Does anybody else have questions for Sarah tonight?
Don't be shy.
Again, you can either throw it in the chat or unmute yourself. There should be a microphone icon towards the top right of your screen that you can click to unmute yourself.
Oh, and I was going to throw this out there. I wasn't sure if I was going to have time. There was just a study published on our 10 years of the box turtle connection. So if you really are interested in the data that's come out so far, you can definitely check that out online. It's free access, open access, so you should be able to get that. And if you want a copy, I can also email it to you. But it was all through the box turtle connection. Took some years and some students at UNC Pembroke to analyze that data, but we've got some data.
Well, if nobody else has any questions, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for bearing with us with some of these technical issues, and thank you. Those of you that need EE credit for this lecture, I will be sending out that form later this week along with the link to this recorded presentation. So if you ever want to go back and rewatch it, you're more than welcome to.